This tutorial is going to address how we work with still images in a sequence, as well as the beginning exploration of motion effects and transitions within either still clips or video clips in an Adobe Premiere sequence. First and foremost, I'd like to do a quick refresher on the best way to pull images off of the internet. I'm going to do a Google Images search for Crested Butte, Colorado. That's my favorite vacation spot. Now, when the search results initially populate, what you see in front of you is a series of pictures. These pictures are collectively referred to as thumbnails, and they're small representations of the actual images themselves, which are usually a lot larger. Now, as I hover over the different pictures, you'll notice a little piece of information pops up down at the very bottom. It gives you a URL, sometimes it's complete, sometimes it's just an abbreviated URL, of where the picture is located, as well as, what's important for us, the resolution of the photo itself. Now, the mistake that I've seen people make is they get in a hurry and say, oh, okay, there's my image. I'm going to right-click, and I'm going to save that image as, and I'm going to put it here. I'm going to call it CBCO and save it to my desktop. All right, cool. Okay, well, let's take a look at that picture on our desktop. CBCO. That is a little tiny picture. And if I do a little inspector show here, you can see that this picture is only 276 pixels by 183 pixels. Remember, we're working within an HD video format, which usually has a resolution of 1920 by 1080. So this picture is about 8 times too small. But if I go back to Google, and I hover back over that image, I can see, where's the one I found? I got to expand this window a little bit. Here's the one I was looking at, 1760 by 1168. So I give it a click, and I see a larger thumbnail representation. Now look, and it's a pretty good sized picture. But watch what happens when I click View Image. There I get a good high resolution photo that I can save to my desktop and work with. And when I open this one up, notice it's a lot larger than the original. And if I go to my inspector window, this one is indeed 1760 by 1168. So I found one. I want to find a minimum of 2. Let me see if I can find something that looks a lot different than just that shot of the mountain. Unfortunately, Crested Butte is famous for its mountains, so I need to find some. Oh, this looks nice. Okay, welcome to Crested Butte. View image. View image. Takes a second order. That is a beautiful picture. All right, save image as. I'm going to call this Welcome CB. It's also saving to my desktop and save. Okay, quick Chrome. I've got 2 pictures on my desktop. This CB original I don't even need. I'm going to start Premiere. Now, I've asked you guys to go out and find a minimum of about 12 pictures. I can't remember exactly how many. You'll have to check the email. That's why I write the email, so I don't have to remember things like that. But I'm going to demonstrate what I'm working with 2 pictures, because sometimes it's easier to demonstrate transitions and timing and everything on a smaller scale before you start applying it on a larger scale with a sequence with more clips. Trying to think of something witty to say while Premiere finds its brain. Nothing's coming to mind. Okay, new project. I'm going to call this Vacation. It's set up to save to my Documents Premiere Projects folder. That's where I save everything. That's quite all right. HDV capture. Okay. So let me import my pictures. I double-click the project bin down below. Users, BAMD desktop. Crested Butte. Command-click Welcome. Import. Okay. A couple things I want you to notice. As you look at your pictures in the bin, it's a lot like looking at video clips. With still images, though, there's really no specific duration for a still picture. Video clips, of course, last as long as however long the recording took place. But Premiere is set up to give a default duration of clips that are still pictures of 5 seconds. You can go into Premiere Preferences and change that if you want to. What I recommend, though, is dragging the clips onto your sequence and then working with them and their duration individually. So I have 2 pictures laid out on my sequence, total duration of 10 seconds. And as I draw my CTI through, you can see that I just go crested butte, straight cut. The first thing I'm going to experiment with is transitions between the clips. I'm going to go to Effects, which is just to the right of the project bin. You can also go to Window and make sure your Effects button is shown. If you don't see Effects, oftentimes it's best to go to Window, Workspace, Reset, or make sure the Effects box is checked. So, video transitions. One of my favorite is the dissolve, and it's just a simple straight fade between 2 clips. I'm going to bounce over here for a second. I'm going to move my CTI to the transition between the 2 clips. I'm going to use the plus button to zoom in so I can see precisely where that transition takes place. And I'm going to take this cross dissolve that's over here in the effects bin, click and hold, and drag it onto my sequence. And you'll notice how the clips light up green depending on where I place it. The best way to do a dissolve is to have it go between the 2 clips, half on one side, half on the other. And you'll see here it's laid out as a cross dissolve, and as I scrub through, I get a nice gradual fade from one to the other. If I hit play, nice fade. The default duration for this dissolve, I believe, is 30 frames or 1 second. If I double click it, you'll see I can set the duration to anything I like. It can be anything from 1 frame up to 10 seconds if I want to do an extremely slow one. The default dissolve rate that I've always used, and this is just based on my habits as a newscast director, video editor, was 10 frames. So I click OK. Notice it gets a lot shorter. I hit play, and it's a nice quick fade between the 2. So that takes care of effects. You can explore all these different effects in your effects window over to the left. You have page turns, you have slides, all kinds of different ways you can transition from one clip to another, and all kinds of different settings that you can transition within as well. Now we're going to address the other major part of this project, and that's applying motion to the pictures that are laid out on the sequence, the individual pictures. In order to do that, the best way is to understand that even if it's just a still image that's sitting on a timeline, there are still some properties that are automatically assigned to it that can be manipulated. And if you ever have any doubt, just give it a double click and bring that clip up in the source window, not the program window, but the source window. And when you double click, notice that first and foremost on the far left tab, you have the source itself, but over to the right, you have some other tabs that we've not really explored yet. I'm going to left click on Effect Controls, and underneath Effect Controls, all of a sudden, I see Motion and Opacity and Time Remapping. Now, Position and Scale are all laid out with specific values, and I can change these, horizontal, vertical. So you see as I scroll it from the left to the right, it changes the position of the picture as I scroll it up and down. And if I change the scale, if I go below 100%, I make it smaller. If I go above 100%, I make it bigger. So those are all settings you can change, but a fundamental skill you need to understand is the concept of keyframing. Anywhere you see this little stopwatch icon next to a property, whether it's rotation, anchor point, opacity, that is something where you can insert a keyframe. I'm going to click on Scale, for example, and set a beginning point for any modifications you want to make. Now, this is where verbally explaining gets a little difficult. Bear with me. What I've done is I've set a scale of 126 at the very beginning of this clip. Notice over here to the right, the clip has its own little timeline. that's related to, but also somewhat independent of the timeline down here. And if I drag my CTI across to, say, the 5-second mark, just at the end, I can put another keyframe for scale. Actually, let me cancel that. I need to change this value first. That's what I forgot to tell you. I'm sorry. I changed the value, say, from 126, I'm going to boost it up a bit since it's a nice high-res picture, up to 250. And so now I have this motion effect in the picture where I start at 126, and as the 5 seconds for that clip go by, the scale increases linearly to 266. And the computer does a process called interpolation, where it says, I need to start at 126. At the end of 5 seconds, I need to be here at 266, so I need to change at this rate. And when you press play, now if you wanted to make that effect a little less drastic, what you could do is you could select the keyframe that resides here on the timeline, and you could change the 266, say, to 177, which is not as drastic a change from the original keyframe. And when you press play, the motion should go a lot more slowly. And one thing I might have forgotten to do is actually select the keyframe itself. And you can see as I move keyframes around, I come up with some really goofy motion effects. And then I scale back. That's where keyframes can get a little tricky. You can delete them. You can shift them around, and you can change their values. And notice here how it becomes a much more slow effect. Keyframing is a fundamental skill that is going to come into not only video editing, but animation, as well as basic graphics. You know, any graphic that has motion or something associated with it is often going to have a keyframe aspect built in where you need to define a beginning and an end and the distance between the two. That's the fundamentals of keyframing. So, with that in mind, I want you to practice some of these skills, selecting different clips and applying different motion effects such as scale, position. You can even have fun with rotation if you want to. And do all kinds of crazy stuff. Select and change. And look at it go. So I hope this tutorial's helped. Again, there's so much I could show you, but I really want to give you enough information to begin experimenting on your own. One final step I'll recommend, and it's based on mistakes I've made, as you're making changes over here, make sure that the appropriate keyframe is selected. And you can tell in Premiere it's selected because it's colored yellow, while any other keyframes are grayscale. Thanks for watching, and let me know if you have any questions.